As the Executive Director of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, I deal with every line of duty death that occurs in our nation. These tragedies affect the community, the family of the fallen, and both large and small departments. This documentary is a series of stories by chiefs who've had that experience. Please take the time to listen and learn so you can have the courage to be safe.
Never in my life would I have thought I would pick up a NIOSH report and read my department's name on that NIOSH report.
Never in my life did I think I would be here today talking to you and to this camera about how to get through a line of duty death.
Never in my life will I forget Kyle Wilson and his family and the sacrifices they made.
Welcome to the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. We're part of two unique clubs, the Fire Service and unfortunately the Line of Duty Deaf Club, which means that we're going to be seeing each other probably in October in Emmitsburg, Maryland. What's your thoughts about that trip?
You've been at Emmitsburg, you've seen that memorial for the firefighters. And if you work there, what you find is that those flags go down every time a firefighter is killed in the line of duty. And what it is a stark reminder that it does happen. Even though as fire chiefs or command of fire departments, that's our nightmare come true. It speaks of the hazards of what the nation's fire service experiences and how we, as a group that doesn't want to be in this club, can help those who think it's never going to happen to them.
One of the things I had said to myself when I was setting goals when I began was that I did not want to have a line of duty death on my watch. I wanted to be one of the first or few commissioners that got through their tenure without having a line of duty death. Didn't happen. So when I received that phone call about our recent line of duty death, Joyce Craig, I remember it like it was yesterday because when I heard her name, I didn't want to believe that it was true. And I actually broke my phone because I threw it to the ground. But I gathered myself, got dressed, responded to the hospital. She was already at the hospital by the time I got there. And just looking at that person that I knew, I was one of the first people that kind of embraced her and tried to mentor her. I remember giving her a strategy and tactics book because she wanted to be very good at her craft. It's very hard and difficult. You start to take things personal and you start to say, how does this happen? How? And it's just a ton of questions going through your mind. But sitting there looking at her that night is probably one of the images that I'll never forget.
I know in our department since 1983, there's 18 names on that wall in Emmitsburg from our department. It was happening way, way, way too much. And we worked very, very, very hard to stop it from ever happening again, with the understanding it absolutely could happen again. August 24th, 2009, we had responded to a fire in a delicatessen that was in a two-story brick building with apartments above and a delicatessen on the first floor. They had reports from a tenant upstairs, a person walking by, a civilian walking by on the sidewalk, and one of the firefighters who died, all reporting to the incident commander that they heard people in the basement screaming for help and pounding. Lieutenant McCarthy was in numerous times, had done a search of the top floor with his crew from Rescue 1, and the chief was ordering everybody out. The lieutenant was making sure the last guys were out, and there was a collapse. Lieutenant Chip McCarthy fell into that collapse about 10 feet, immediately into the fire. We got a Mayday transmission for a very short time, and then terrible, terrible screaming for help. Another firefighter on our RIT team, firefighter John Kroom, dashed into the building and ended up in that same hull. The fire was gaining headway the whole time. Finally, there was a point where the incident commander ordered that we weren't going in any further. We have to do what we can to control this fire before we can go back in. I don't know if you can give a greater sacrifice than your life to try and save someone else, one of your brothers, and that's exactly what John Kroom did. We ended up finding John and Chip head to foot, right next to each other. I don't know if I could truly articulate the emotions that went through. I truly felt like my heart was breaking. It was just a very, very, very difficult moment.
When it comes to a chief's responsibilities when dealing with a line of duty death, it begins with recognizing the need to be prepared and the significant amount of preparation.
There needs to be serious planning about what we're going to do organizationally if, God forbid, we find ourselves in a situation where one of our members dies.
Be prepared for it and pray you never need it, but have it there just in case.
I've seen it happen in other small departments. I've read NIOSH reports many times, but you just never think it's going to happen to you. It happens. It happened to me, and if you're not careful, it can happen to you.
So how do we change behavior?
You order it. Some things are not a group have down at the hydrant. Some things, if you have 5 bugles, you have to make them happen.
That's very well said. The catalyst for change in Pittsburgh was Bryceland Street. The catalyst for change in Asheville was 445 Biltmore Avenue.
Yep.
It comes down to that fire chief having the courage to make change and not waiting for a tragedy to be that catalyst. You have those 5 bugles for a reason. Have the courage to make the change that you know needs to happen in your department now. July 28, 2011 was the worst day of my life. Our fire department was dispatched to an automatic alarm. It ended up being a working structure fire that was started by an arsonist. It was in a 7-story commercial medical facility. Over 200 people were inside that building in the middle of the day. Captain Bowen responded on our rescue company and was doing a secondary search when he and his company became low on air. As they were exiting the building, Captain Bowen appeared to be disoriented and went away from the exit and deeper into the fire. The members of the company attempted to rescue him. When they met up in the smoke conditions, zero visibility, Captain Bowen told his firefighter, he said, "Jay, we need to buddy breathe." At that time, Captain Bowen called his first mayday. It was 14 minutes and 13 seconds before we were able to locate them. Jay had rescued him to the safety of the south stairwell. He had pulled him about 200 feet with no respiratory protection himself. That action saved a lot of our firefighters' lives. If we would have had to remove him from the fire floor, we would have lost more firefighters. The information that was in Captain Bowen's line of duty death packet, written by him, was that if that day ever happened, he wanted his best friend, who was also a firefighter, present when his wife was told. We never would have known that, how important that was to Jeff, had he not written that in that packet. And when she heard that news, she looked straight at me and said, "Why, Scott? Why?" His words haunt me to this day. I didn't know an answer to her question. I didn't know the answer to why. Our department was committed from that day forward to answering the why, to improving, and to sharing that information with as many people in the fire service as we could.
I'm sure anyone who has gone through this and experienced this is going to question, is there something you could have done personally?
Is there guilt with a line of duty death? Yes, there is. And it's a guilt I carry because it will not be the pain that the family feels. The family's pain is much more than your guilt, and it always will be. But you always carry a guilt that, did I do the best for my firefighter?
There's a long-term loss to so many family members and children and so many others that people can't really recover from. That's the worst part. You don't really recover from that. You move on, but you don't recover. You don't get it back. You don't get that person back.
As a chief, I don't know, on top of the fact that it's just terrible for everybody, I think it's one of the most lonely things that you can experience in your life, is to deal with everything to do with it. I don't know if I ever felt so alone in my life.
This is a small group, fortunately, and the road that brought all of us to this table has been extremely painful for all of us.
Charlie was my father-in-law, and he was the one that got me into the fire service originally. That particular night we had a really bad storm come through, and we had some trees fall over the road. I called my father-in-law. I said, hey, you might want to take this other road and go around that way, and that was the last conversation I had with him. They got there, they cut up about 3 trees, and they moved on to their 4th one. Charlie was just, he was laughing and joking, and then all of a sudden fell down face first on the pavement. We grabbed him, put him in the ambulance, and myself and my assistant chief, we hopped in there and did CPR on him all the way to the hospital. I knew he wasn't coming back. Most people say notifying the family is the worst part of the line of duty death, and I would imagine it would be. However, our situation, Charlie's wife was listening to all of it unfold on the radio. I walk out of the hospital and my phone rings and it's her. And she's like, how do you get into this hospital? I need to see my husband. And she was just hysterical. She already knew that he was gone, and I didn't really have to say much. But just walking my mother-in-law into the hospital was the hardest part.
2007, April 16th, I experienced a line of duty death, which is something that no fire chief ever wants to experience. That morning, our department responded to a house fire. En route to the call, I remember on the phone calling one of the chief officers and asking him how things looked, and he said not good. And that was his way of telling me, and what I interpreted right away was that we had a fatality on that house fire. And it was a 24-year-old technician that had been with us for 18 months. He had just been assigned to fill in at the truck company that day, and he got caught up in the house fire and lost his life there. What can you say as their chief to ease the pain that they're going through? And I remember saying to them, I'm sorry, I wish I had words that I could take your pain away, that I could make all this disappear. I said, but I don't. But I'll never forget, ever, the looks on their faces.
The hard part was staying strong and being that strong person for the rest of the members in the department. That was the hard part.
As chief, everybody's looking at you. When they're looking, I'm looking at them, and take a deep breath. How do you say that? What do you say? What would you want somebody to say to you? How do you say that, Chief? And then I said it. And she asked me to say it again. She said, what? Then I said, there was an accident on the parkway, and your son, Nadar, is dead. And she turned and she ran away from us down a hallway toward her bedroom. And at that point, I didn't know what to do. You can think about it in terms of preparation. Well, if we have, I'll do. But it's tough, man.
I can remember so clearly the look on the wife of the captain that wasn't going home. That look on her face, she didn't have to say anything. I could tell by the look on her face is, my God,
What happened tonight? Oh, he's been to hundreds of fires. What went wrong? How could this possibly be? And the look on the mother and father's face was equally. He was a deputy chief on the job. It was his son. I didn't have to ask. I could tell. But it wasn't the questions that they were asking. It was the crushing look on their face.
It was a very, very somber moment, as one can imagine. And, the family was in shock. Being small, close-knit community, we all knew each other. I grew up with his kids. He was on the department. When I got on, I played football with his son.
We lost Trampus Haskovitz, a young firefighter that worked for my agency. He was an engine boss on a state engine crew working out of the southern Black Hills of western South Dakota. Him and his crew and the engine got into a position on a mid-slope road in a very tough part of the Black Hills, a rugged area. The fire blew up, caught Trampus and his crew. Trampus's 2 crew members survived, but unfortunately Trampus just couldn't get out in time. And the helicopter came in and it flew the fire and reported it was just, an average looking fire started by lightning in a canyon area. And the fire danger that day was in moderate, so maybe our awareness wasn't up that much as it should be. And something that looks normal can react in just a few moments and turn into a tragedy fire. From that day on, my life has changed. When it came to August 11th of 2011, yeah, that's been the worst day of my life. What I think about most since that day is I reached out to a longtime fellow firefighter, and she had dealt with down at Grand Junction in 1994 with the aftermath of the South Canyon Storm King tragedy. And she said, our business comes with a lot of emotional scars, and the way that you heal that emotional scars to be in service to the families that lost their family members. And to that date, that message she gave me on that first day has always resonated with me, and it's helped me as a firefighter and a person heal. And I can't overemphasize enough, for you to heal and for them to heal, you need to be available at the times they want you to be available. And it's just not for 1 year or 2 years after the incident. It's going to be for the rest of your life. And that's the way it should be, because they were part of your family too. If you were a true firefighter, you consider that firefighter as a part of your family as well.
Communication is extremely important in a line of duty death. There are so many things that are happening at one time. We had to, make sure that we were reaching out to everybody as quickly as we possibly could, because it affected so many people beyond just the crew that was there that night from Homewood.
With the media, you have to try to give them some information, because an event like that, everyone's watching and paying attention. So you have to balance that with what you can give them and what you can't give them. They're going to press you because they have their own career and craft, and those two missions, they're not intertwined. Our mission of saving and protecting people is not their mission of giving the information. What's sad to me is that when a department has a line of duty death, that's when they're the most vulnerable. If people will say some things out of hurt and pain that may not always be true, this is based off of emotion, and the media would jump on that. They want to talk to you, then they want to talk to the people that responded. And the people that responded may not have the same level of expertise or professionalism to respond to those questions, so they're hurt. And then you have this social media piece that comes in, where people are saying things because of their hurt and pain, and once you press send, you can't get it back. You just can't get it back.
The disrespectful, hateful things that people put on social media, I wasn't prepared for that personally, kind of emotionally, and those were very hurtful things to read online. I never would have expected that.
We had a Mayday declared, and instantly, not only was that information shared locally, it was shared nationally. The radio traffic that is broadcast over the internet, live, firefighters all over the country were hearing this. We have 250 firefighters in Asheville. Adding every one of those firefighters, the number of friends and family that they have, we're estimating that about 1,000 people were directly affected immediately once that Mayday was called.
Social media, you can't get ahead of it. And so it's important for you, as someone who's expected to deliver a message, is to make that a part of your planning as well. What my experience has taught me is the family and other members of the department may know before you know. And so it's important to ask, as the chief, when you meet with the family or anybody who's involved or has an interest, what have you been told? You can't outrun it, so you need to find out what people know before you start talking.
As tough as you want to be and as hard-faced you want to be in front of your men, you do what you got to do so they don't see you fall down.
You need that help. You need that support, not just morally, but you need it to get through, that first few days, the first week, the first month. It ended up being a few years, but it doesn't go away after a couple days. It takes a long, long time.
I realized then that the only people that you can really relate to and talk to was somebody who has undergone the same experience.
I had a friend reach out to me that I had no idea what he was trying to do for me, and by the afternoon of that day, Valentine's Day, I picked up the phone and talked to him. Obviously, he knew exactly what I was going through because he'd experienced the same the year before. And that was enormous for me because it gave me somebody that I could talk to quietly and confidently.
You don't have to carry it all. There are people who want to help you, who are willing to help you.
I would advise anyone, if they ever go through this, to get in touch with their state last team immediately. And if they're not sure who that is, make a phone call to their state association or to the Fallen Firefighters Foundation, because there are resources out there that people will be glad to help you through this because it's a challenging time.
I underestimated how much help was going to be offered. I probably didn't accept as much of the help as I should have.
Don't try to do it alone. There's other people out there that's gone through this that can help you. There's a chaplain in your department or somebody that you can talk to. And if nothing else, call the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. They have people that can help you get through this because the people they sent to us were fantastic.
When you talk about how do you help those members heal, the members that found her, the members that worked in her company, especially the people that worked at night. One of the things that I did was I visited those stations. And I went out to those companies, to the company that found her. And what I did was I allowed them to vent and express their pain and hurt. And the one thing I said, you can say anything you want to me, as long as it's respectful. I don't care if you want to point fingers, except for I don't want you to point fingers at each other, but I want you to be able to get off your chest of what you think went wrong, what do you think we need, and they did that. And by allowing them to do that, it starts the healing process for them, but it also reconnects you with the members because they realize you're human too, and that you do care and that you do understand.
I can think of one particular member who was very quiet after all of this. And after some time had passed, he came up and he asked me if I was okay. And I really appreciated that.
We forget about, that it wasn't just the Homewood Fire Department. There's a lot of people that helped that night that we have to make sure we're reaching out to their chiefs and their deputies to, how are your guys doing? How are their families doing? So we go from one firefighter line of duty death, you branch that out, you're talking a couple hundred people that we have to keep an eye on.
30 days after Captain Bowen's death, I was in the parking lot of our hospital holding one of our members who had just been discharged from the hospital who had attempted to take his own life. Ironically, this was right across the street from the fire building. Ironically, the flags that had been at half-staff for 30 days were going back up that day because it was exactly 30 days. The radio announcement came across, and we both held each other and wept. That was the first of a total of 3 very similar stories of our members that the guilt was so high that they didn't want to continue to live. 2 a.m., I was called to one of our members' homes about a year later, and physically took the weapon out of his hand. It's a very real risk, and something that after line of duty death particularly, we as fire chiefs need to make sure that our members are taken care of and that we are our brother's keeper.
Just asking may be enough, but if you ask and someone says, well, I do feel like I need something, then be about getting them that something. You didn't sign up to be damaged. You signed up to help.
We've had our share of very serious, debilitating injuries in our job. And because sometimes it's not a death, there's more of a, it's not a big deal, and it is a big deal. It's a real big deal.
So it's my responsibility when I get there to say, are we really operating as safely as we can be? Are we using sound strategy and tactics? Are we putting our people in harm's way? Those things sound so simple and basic, but it's the basic and simple things that wind up getting us killed in the line of duty. When you think about Joyce Craig, she died in a basic house fire, a 2-story, middle-of-the-road dwelling, 15 by 35. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do every single day. If we're supposed to be professionals and we can't get the bread and butter right, what happens when we have the multiple lawn fires, which put us at greater risk? I don't care if people think I'm being picky, too technical, I don't care. To me, if we get the little things right, the other things will take care of themselves.
It is the basic stuff. And I think I take it one further, not just training, but practice. We don't do what we think we do enough. I don't care where you are, the busiest place in the world, you're not doing that stuff enough. And the fire service has a little bit of a short memory. We're also very trendy. So the high angle underwater bomb squad's a big thing, whatever the case may be, new right now. But we don't want to pay attention to the stuff that matters every single day. Oh, well, we know that. And I don't think we do always know that.
Before I could even get out of the house, the phone rang again. It was the same supervisor. And he said, "Chief, I'm sorry, but they're in cardiac arrest." And I said to him, what do you mean? You said they were going to be okay. They had taken a little smoke. And he said, no, Chief. These are 3 different ones. These are 3 other firefighters. All I could think of was 6. As it turned out, the original 3 did survive. They were okay. But the 3 that he said were in cardiac arrest, they weren't okay. And then when I found out that the building was an average-sized residential house where people lived, I couldn't process that. Pittsburgh? We've been fighting fires for 120 years. This was not something new. This was not out of the ordinary for us. In fact, that was the trap. It was routine. And what we learned that night, there are no routine fires. It was a hard lesson to be reminded of.
April 11th, 2006, we responded to a structure fire with a reported person trapped. Initial reports where there was a victim. When I arrived, it was confirmed there was a lady in the house. They had located the victim and they were on their way out of the house. They were at the threshold of the front door with the victim and the 5 guys, and the floor collapsed into the basement. Crews worked to rescue Kevin, and they were able to remove him from the building. I believe it was like 43 minutes after the initial call. When they got him to the hospital, they worked on him briefly, and he was pronounced dead at Robert Wood Johnson Hospital. Looking at everything we did everything by the book. We stretched the hand line. The crew went in with a hand line. They went in with the thermal camera. They went in with tools. They did everything they were taught. We trained so hard. Training's a big thing. We train every week for the little house fire. I'm a big stickler on training. We push. We push our people to be the best.
We lost Brian March 30th of 2009. I had been the fire chief there for 6 months in Homewood. I was the 4th chief in 4 years when I came in. Brian was a new recruit firefighter. He'd only been out with us a few months. He'd had a few years experience, but not a lot of fire experience. So there was a lot of things that went wrong that night. There was a lot of things I was working on as chief at the time as far as policy changes, SOG changes, different things that we were doing within the department because we knew that things weren't being done right. But I made a commitment to myself, literally, that night that I was going to stick with this and see it through to the end. And I was not going to be the next chief to leave Homewood. I would make sure that these changes were instituted and that this became the best department it possibly could be. How this tragedy affected our members was probably the one area that I was blindsided the most. It's just human nature, but people wanted to blame someone, whether it was the family that was upset about the fire, whether it was firefighters in the firehouse, whether it was firefighters on the scene from other departments, me as chief. So there was a lot of animosity within our own department with some of the members for a long time. There's still some today that do this because of what had happened that night. And that's the hardest thing, to try to bring the family back together, because that's what you're trying to do. When we went through the investigation, a lot of people come in. We have NIOSH come in, we have the state come in, we have the local investigation, the insurance companies. Everybody wants to know what's going on. And my one message to the chiefs would be, you better be ready. You better be ready for an investigation. I think a lot of the investigations that occurred and some of the pity that was taken on me was because I was the new chief there. Had I been a 5-year chief, a 10-year chief, and that happened, and they had seen the way we were operating, there would have been some real consequences for me as chief. And I think chiefs fail to realize that sometimes, that you are responsible for this. A line of duty death may happen, but you're also responsible for what occurred before that line of duty death, as far as training, as far as staying current with your local mandates or your state mandates. There are trainings that we are mandated to do, I think, in every state in this country, and if we're not doing them, you're the one that's ultimately responsible. It's a common occurrence that we don't train enough on these things, especially when we don't have the fires. So we talk about fire behavior, we talk about building construction. Actually, 2 areas that, other than what you learn in the academy, don't get talked about a whole lot after you're a firefighter, but yet they're so critical to what happened that night, to how we operated, to the decisions that were made, understanding the type of building you're going in. How is that fire behaving? What is it doing? Understanding all the signs of a backdraft or of a flashover, the different things that could come into play in a small structure. To me, this was like a garage fire. How could this happen? I just think about the family. I think about how difficult it had to be for them, especially after we went through the investigation and we went through the NIOSH report and we knew exactly what had happened and how preventable this tragedy was. And to this day, they're always on my mind.
In all my life, I've never thought that I'd be a member of this club. Chiefs that's went through line of duty deaths, and I hope it doesn't happen to anyone else.
If you look at who's at the table here, we have chiefs from some of the largest cities in the country. We have chiefs from very small rural departments. We have the wildfire community. There is no element of the fire service that is immune from this. And I don't think any of us ever expected to be here. And I think, at least speaking for myself, the best thing that could come out of this is that everybody thinks about, this really could happen to me in my department. And part of my duty is to work every day to lessen the chance that I'm going to be part of this club.
As your United States Fire Administrator, I implore each and every one of you to do all that you can to prevent firefighter line of duty deaths.
Take every day as an opportunity to change your department. Don't let a tragedy be your catalyst for change.
Not every line of duty death is preventable, but you must be ready to lead your department if one happens to yours.
Every fire chief has to consider the possibility that they're going to experience a line of duty death. They have to be ready for that on a personal level, on a professional level, and accept the responsibility and the commitment that goes along with that.
Whether paid or volunteer, we're here to serve our communities. And as a chief, we need to make sure all our members are able to go home to their families.
As a leader, you have to be mentally and physically fit to make the right decisions. Make sure you make that happen.
Every chief that's experienced a line of duty death has thought it would never happen to them. Don't let that happen to you.
Remember, in the event it happens to you, be the leader, be prepared, and take care of the family.
You should never let down your guard and make sure that safety is your #1 priority.
If you ever have to go through a line of duty death, remember, you do not have to go through this alone. Rely on your family, your team, and your department.
If you want to prevent a line of duty death in your fire department, make sure your firefighters are trained and are situationally aware of what they're doing at all times.
No building construction, no fire behavior. Train, train, and train.
Remember, training and discipline is really what matters. It's going to keep you safe. Train every single day like your life depends on it, because it truly does.
I urge you to do whatever you have to do so that you never have to go through what I went through.